All right, I think we can get started. So, thank you for taking the time to join us on what's going to be a really important conversation about how destinations prepare and adapt to climate change. So, let's dive right in. I'm Kyla Egan, and I'm a destination development consultant at Resonance, and I'm joined today by my colleague Beth Wright. And together we'll explore how tourism leaders can move from acknowledging climate change to taking meaningful adaptation action. We'll start with who we are at Resonance, look at our current climate reality, examine cities on the front lines, and set the stage for a climate risk scan and Colorado tourism discussion later on. So for those of you who don't know Resonance, we create transformative strategies, brands, and campaigns that bring cities, destinations, hotels, and resorts to life. Our global team, based in New York, Vancouver, and Brussels, bring together futurists, strategists, designers, storytellers, and economists, all focused on shaping the future of travel and place. So what makes us unique is our balance of research, strategy, branding, and marketing, combining the logic on one side with what our creative studio team calls magic on the other. We research travel and global trends. We plan for sustainable growth. We express the identity and essence of a place and promote it to the world through creative marketing and storytelling. And at the heart of everything we do is one simple mission, helping places realize their full potential. We aim to make destinations more livable, more lovable, and more prosperous, fostering community, preserving cultural heritage, and creating lasting vibrancy and economic benefit for all. And we're really proud to partner with visionary places around the world, from Ireland to Aruba and beyond. And I think that really brings us perfectly to today's topic, because building that kind of future means confronting our climate reality head on. So let's talk about what that reality really looks like. So, as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, climate disruption is happening now, and it's happening to all of us. We are here because the world is facing a grave climate emergency. So this is no longer a distant threat. It's shaping tourism right now. So for years, climate change was framed as something we deal with later. But destinations are already living its impacts. This isn't about what might happen, it's about what is happening and how that's reshaping travel experiences today. So really that switch from climate change to the idea of climate reality. And what we're seeing is this everywhere. It's wildfires devastating Maui, it's flooding threatening Venice, and record heat in Tokyo, forcing event cancellations and shifting travel patterns. Climate change is directly influencing the visitor experience, sometimes overnight. And the economic impact is just as stark. A single degree of warming can erase nearly 10% of international visitation in some markets. In the Caribbean, climate vulnerability translates directly into GDP loss. In the US, the ski industry has lost $5 billion, with losses projected to reach $1 billion per year by 2050. And in Australia, climate risks threaten hundreds of thousands of tourism jobs. And these, of course, are not hypotheticals. They're happening now, showing us how tightly tourism's future is tied to climate action. So the question really becomes, how do we respond to this? Well, we need to move from abstract planning to immediate action. So when we talk about climate reality, we accept that disruptions are already here and that our plans, investments, and strategies must respond now. So this is really a critical pivot point for tourism leaders. So let's turn to where much of the adaptation will play out, and that's our cities, and really the focus of today's conversation. When people think of climate risk, they often picture coastlines or mountain towns, but of course cities are just as exposed and just as critical to tourism's future. As many of you know already, more than 80% of international trips involve an urban destination. And those cities, of course, face heat waves, flooding, and strain on infrastructure that both residents and visitors rely on every day. But there is an inherent benefit here that we can talk about, and that's cities aren't just vulnerable, they're powerful testing grounds for climate smart tourism. Urban environments let us test solutions at scale and also allow us to set examples for the rest of the world. So because of city scale, urban adaptation has outsized benefits. Investing in systems like cooling, transit, and green infrastructure protect locals and visitors alike. And it also allows innovations piloted in cities that can later be scaled to regions and rural areas. So by treating urban destinations as testing grounds, we can accelerate strategies that safeguard communities while sustaining tourism competitiveness. In other words, what happens in our cities sets the tone for adaptation elsewhere. So I want to talk a little bit about our climate action framework. So in general, when we talk about climate action, it generally falls into three interconnected categories. The first is mitigation, so efforts to reduce global emissions throughout cleaner transport, renewable energy, and carbon-conscious operations. In the tourism industry, this is often led by private travel companies and industry groups. So, for example, airlines improving fuel efficiency, hotels investing in renewables, or tour operators offsetting carbon. The second is the idea of resilience. So, strengthening the systems and infrastructure that support communities, things like transit, housing, and utilities. Now, of course, this is typically led by government, focusing on keeping people safe and services running during climate shocks. The third category is adaptation, and that's really what our conversation today is focused on. It's how people live, work, and travel in response to new climate realities, whether that's cooling access, redesigned visitor infrastructure, or new approaches to seasonality. So what I'm going to focus this conversation on is adaptation. And why does adaptation matter most for tourism? So travelers feel climate impacts directly, businesses face rising costs, and DMOs influence when and where people travel. So DMOs can shape visitor flows, influence experiences, and communicate real-time safety and access information, turning climate risk into opportunities for smarter, more sustainable tourism. Essentially, tourism lives inherently in the adaptation space. Visitors, when they're traveling, don't notice emission targets, but they do notice the heat, the flooding, or the smoke. And that's what makes adaptation the most tangible and immediate lever for our sector. So the next slide is going to show three different maps. And our partners at AlphaGeo specialize in geospatial analytics that model how climate hazards such as heat stress, drought, wildfire, flooding, and coastal storms are projected to evolve over time. Their platform combines satellite data, global climate models, and socioeconomic indicators to assess the physical risk exposure of destinations and communities. So what we're going to be looking at here are three versions of that risk profile. So for the map that you currently see on the screen, this shows the current risk. So today's baseline exposure across regions and destination types. If we look at map number 2, this is resilient adjusted risk in 2050. So how the exposure changes when local adaptation measures are implemented, not just such as flood barriers, tree canopy expansion, and wildfire buffers. And if we look at the third map that's about to go on the screen, that is no action risk. So what the same areas look like if absolutely nothing is done by 2050. And you can see some pretty considerable changes, particularly throughout the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, and around coastal areas. So these visualizations are powerful because they show, one, that adaptation works, and two, it has measurable impact. Even modest investments in infrastructure and other systems can flatten the curve of future losses. Without them, we're not just facing warmer temperatures, we're looking at compound risks that intensify rapidly by 2050 and beyond, threatening both the visitor economy and community resilience. So in other words, data like this helps us move from awareness to action, grounding adaptation evidence and showing where to prioritize investment. And this is what North America looks like if no action is taken by 2095. So within the lifetime of someone born today, the difference between action and inaction could determine whether many of our favorite destinations still exist as we know them. And that's why adaptation isn't optional, it's essential. And I think this conversation really sets us up for the next section, where Beth Wright will take us through the role of DMOs and how tourism organizations can turn these ideas into action on the ground.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Kyla. And let me know if anyone can't hear or see me, but thank you. We're going to dive into how destination marketing and management organizations can really take a leading role within climate adaptation and resilience. So unlike other sectors, tourism has a people lever. DMOs directly shape a lot of human behavior related to travel around the timing, location, and scale of visitor activity. That influence can be very powerful for adaptation, and it puts tourism leaders in a unique position to support both climate smart choices and community resilience. So this really means that DMOs are in a position to turn climate challenges into opportunities by focusing on four key main areas. The first really being around visitor dispersal, so spreading demand across seasons and locations to reduce pressure on vulnerable areas. The second, focused on experience design, is about creating attractions and activities that work with, not against, the new climate realities that are unfolding. The third is around visitor information, so providing travelers with timely, accurate information to keep them safe and confident on their travels. And the fourth is really around strategic alignment. So how are we integrating tourism with broader city climate goals to maximize shared benefits? So in the next few slides, we're going to dig into some of the real world case studies. All right, so focusing a little on visitor dispersal, we're taking an example from Barcelona. So Barcelona's approach shows dispersal truly in action. By shifting visitors to cooler, safer spaces during heat waves, the city both protects people and sustains the tourism economy. This is very much a climate smart visitor management tool at work. So what ends up happening is around when temperatures soar above 32 degrees Celsius, so around 89 Fahrenheit, Barcelona activates a comprehensive visitor safety protocol. This looks like the city redirecting tourists from exposed outdoor attractions to air-conditioned museums, underground spaces, and shaded parks in cooler neighborhoods. This is done through digital messaging and hotel partnerships to ensure visitors receive real-time guidance that'll both protect them around safety and ensures their satisfaction during extreme heat events. When it comes to experience design, we're featuring an example from Singapore, where they've really transformed climate adaptation into world-class attractions by investing in massive climate-controlled conservatories and indoor nature experiences, such as Gardens by the Bay. Additionally, Singapore's the city's extensive network of air-conditioned walkways, underground connections, and indoor nature experiences also allows for visitors to enjoy lush greenery year-round, regardless of the external weather conditions that are happening. For our fourth example around visitor information, we're taking a look at British Columbia, where unfortunately wildfires are a reoccurring and increasing seasonal challenge. And so regional destination management organizations have made visitor safety a priority. Through their websites and social media channels, there's a collective effort for travelers to access real-time updates on wildfire activity, road closures, and emergency alerts, sources directly from agencies like Emergency Info BC and Drive BC. So really collecting that information in places where it's easy for visitors to find. By providing clear, timely information like this, it really helps visitors make safe decisions, eases pressures on emergency responders, and protects the region's tourism reputation during climate-related disruptions. In our fourth example around strategic alignment, we're looking at C40. So their Building Resilience initiative is a great example of how tourism can align with broader city climate goals. So several of the member cities have hotels or working with local governments to deliver cooling and shading projects. There's initiatives around improving energy and water efficiency, as well as establishing shared emergency protocols for when there are extreme weather in high visitation districts. This approach really positions tourism as an active partner in citywide resilience, and this ensures that investments benefit both residents and visitors and also strengthen the destination's long-term competitiveness. So what we'd like to do now is actually introduce an exciting new opportunity for city destinations to take command of their climate adaptation and resilience futures. We've seen that the four levers show us what adaptation can look like, but what we've really learned through our work is destinations still face the challenge of deciding where to start and how to prioritize. It can often be seen as a really daunting task to get into climate adaptation and resilience work from the perspective of a tourism organization. And that's really how we came to understand the importance of this program. We really know that every city has different vulnerabilities, visitor flows, and infrastructure pressures. We also recognize that each destination has their own unique set of strengths, whether it's in various partnerships and organizational capacities, certain funding programs that could be available at a state or regional level, and other development opportunities in that particular area. So to really move from examples to action, we recognize that destinations really need a framework that translates climate risks into clear choices for investment and strategy. And this is why we're excited to partner with the Travel Foundation and a global coalition of partners to pilot the City Destination Risk Scan Initiative. So this is the result. This is the third of three pilot initiatives of the Risk Scan program led by the Travel Foundation. And this particular one is designed to give cities a clear picture of their specific climate risks to tourism and to link those insights directly to adaptation and investment strategies. This is really important because it's not also happening in isolation. What's great about this particular program is that alongside others that are participating in other pilots currently going on for both coastal and winter destination cohorts, you're able to really learn from those cohorts and the city cohort itself about your specific risk, but how it relates to other destinations too. So you're really learning things for your place, but you're benefiting global knowledge and sharing and comparing insights with other similar destinations from around the world. So the value of the risk scan is really mostly in what it delivers for you. Firstly, it provides a decision-making tool so leaders know exactly where to focus their resources. It lays out adaptation pathways specific to each destination's risks and opportunities. It also will strengthen the authority of a destination marketing or management organization in broader planning discussions with city and regional and state partners, really by equipping them with credible data. And finally, it provides a tangible ROI, really helping destinations avoid costly missteps while attracting investors who increasingly want to see climate resilience in place before doing investment. The benefits really do also extend beyond tourism. A risk scan helps destinations remain competitive as climate pressures mount. It demonstrates clear leadership and preparedness, which strengthens trust with governments, partners, and communities. It can also deepen partnerships with resilience agendas at the city and national level. And just as importantly, it builds confidence among investors and residents that the destination is serious about adaptation and ready to safeguard long-term future. We know that adaptation can't wait, which is why we're really putting our own commitment onto the table. So Resonance has decided to dedicate 1% of our revenue to climate smart tourism by launching a £5,000 pilot grants for 3 cities to join the first city destination risk scan. So these cities that would participate with the grants won't be working in isolation. They'd be part of a wider global cohort, sharing lessons and innovations. And with the Travel Foundation and our academic and industry partners, we're ensuring tourism becomes embedded in broader resilience planning. So this isn't just about creating a tool, but really embodying a movement where tourism becomes a driver for climate solutions. So whether you're here representing a tourism organization or are actively working with city DMOs, we would like to encourage you to learn more about the Destination Risk Scan project and the climate action grant offered by Resonance. And you can do so by visiting our website, which is in the top right corner. So resonanceco.com/climate-action. And we'll also put that into the chat so you can learn more about the wider program itself and these 3 unique grants that are happening. The important part, our initial deadline for the applications will be October 30th, so just next week. It's a very simple application process. Folks who have taken it, maybe it's taken about 10 minutes to complete it fully. Those that wanted a little more time took about 20 minutes. So if you are interested in this, we encourage you to take a look to fill out our simple application, and we'll set up a time to connect. All right, so this is really a perfect time for us to transition into talking with our guest speaker. We really want to look at what does climate adaptation look like on the ground. So we're going to be speaking with Hillary Lukowitz of the Colorado Tourism Office, who's actually participating in one of the risk scan programs now. So as a little bit of an introduction, I'm really excited that Hillary's joining us, longtime colleague and friend. She's coming and representing us from the Colorado Tourism Office. She does have a very long and extended history working in sustainable tourism. So she's truly been a leader in this space since 2011, followed by more than a decade of experience in conservation biology and outdoor education. She has led destination development initiatives for the CTO, the Colorado Tourism Office, since 2017. And she's also an adjunct instructor at the New York University, teaching courses on sustainable tourism. So Hillary, before we get started in our conversation, would you like to share anything else about yourself or the CTO?
Well, thanks, Beth, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. We're actually at our annual tourism conference in Colorado Springs, so I was able to sneak this in. But I have a session later this afternoon with Jeremy Sampson from the Travel Foundation, so great timing. Um, and we are the Colorado Tourism Office is the state of Colorado's destination marketing and management organization. We are a division of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade that sits within the governor's office, and we work directly with DMOs across the state of Colorado.
Thank you so much, Hillary. So let's kind of dive right in. We'd love to talk about climate action in Colorado. We recognize it's a fantastic state that has such a wonderful blend of urban destinations, emerging places, and rural communities. So maybe we can just kind of ground in with understanding the kind of risk that Colorado destinations are facing. So maybe you could explain for everybody a little more of what climate risks are emerging as the most relevant for Colorado tourism's industry right now.
Yeah, so when we first started talking about climate action and risk and resiliency, we were initially focused on winter tourism and our ski industry and the continued decline of snow days and winters due to climate change. So, snow reliability is certainly a big one for us. Wildfire in the summer, perceived risk to wildfire. So the role that the media also plays in kind of blowing up something that might be happening in the northwest corner of the state and causing somebody to potentially cancel plans hundreds of miles away. And then water. So we are reliant on our snowpack in the Rockies to feed into our rivers and the Colorado River. So that sort of water flow, not only for our tourism industry that's reliant on outdoor recreation, but also just water demand, especially in the southwest part of the state, where we've been in a long time drought.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of challenges on multiple fronts and things that are really impacting not just for visitor experience and satisfaction, but really communities themselves and the ability for businesses to really run their businesses and depend on each tourism season. So it sounds like quite a bit to take on. But we get to start somewhere. And I think that was really exciting when y'all joined up in the Climate Risk Scan project, particularly because the Colorado Tourism Office has already been doing quite a lot along the lines of climate action, albeit maybe calling it under other banners. And so would love to hear maybe second, in what ways the Colorado Tourism Office is really aligning its adaptation and resilience efforts with broader state goals and resilience planning. So if you've got any kind of examples of some of those alignment opportunities that have come forward.
Yeah, and I will maybe take a step back. Last year in the fall of 2024, we completed the statewide destination stewardship strategic plan, and that includes a section on climate action and strategies. And so there's been some thought process that goes into how we fit into statewide climate action planning. I will say, with the communities that we work with, and as well as the Colorado Tourism Office, we typically haven't had a seat at the table in climate action planning and resilience planning. It's just usually how that goes, where we are trying to see how we fit in the puzzle, knowing that tourism is both affected by and impacted or impacts climate change. It's been interesting to see how we haven't been a part of the conversation, but really need to see how we fit in. The state of Colorado has a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% in the year 2030. And it's interesting going through the plan, just doing like a keyword search. Tourism does not exist in that plan. Certainly the aviation industry does, but really, trying to see both from that adaptation space, but also the mitigation space, how we fit in, and understanding our sphere of influence. So I kind of want to talk a little, I know we're focused on adaptation, but I do want to talk about that mitigation piece because I think it's really important that not only are we planning for the future, but we're also being proactive and reducing greenhouse gas emissions while we work towards sort of this resilience planning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, Beth, if that's okay with the
Hey,
emissions
yeah,
reduction.
love to
Okay.
hear about it.
Awesome. And so the state of Colorado came out with a climate action plan about 5 years ago. They formed the Colorado Energy Office based on that. And we actually have a really fantastic partnership with the Energy Office to electrify all of Colorado's scenic and historic byways across the state. So that's one really neat way how we're slotting into emissions reduction. We have 26 scenic and historic byways across the state. I have a seat on the Byways Commission, and I work really closely with the Energy Office and Department of Transportation to figure out how we can electrify these byways. Electrifying a byway means that there's a charging station. There's infrastructure every 100 miles, so a visitor could travel across a scenic byway and know comfortably that they can charge their electric vehicle. Right now we have, I think by next month, we'll have 20 out of the 26 byways designated as electrified. So this program's been going on since 2019 or 2020. So it's been about 5 years. And this has been a really fantastic opportunity to not only work on this infrastructure piece and be a partner, knowing kind of where our sphere of influence is, because as a destination marketing and management organization, we can partner and support infrastructure projects, but really where we shine is in that communications and marketing piece. And so we've been able to take this scenic and historic byway electrification and really get that out to our travelers in the form of new experiences and promotional efforts. So that's been a really fantastic opportunity. So I'll stop there with the mitigation piece and focus a little bit more on resiliency now. The state also has a climate resiliency plan. Um, Tourism is interesting how it slots into this. The state has 6 priorities, and one of those includes community and how to empower communities to improve resiliency, equity, and capacity. And really, that's where I see a big sort of piece of the puzzle for us is that as a DMO, we really are collaborators and conveners. We're able to bring a lot of stakeholders to the table and have these conversations and be able to move forward based on understanding a lot of different stakeholders, their resources, and how they fit together. And so last spring, we launched the Colorado Tourism Climate Champions program, and that was in partnership with the Travel Foundation to help our DMO partners across the state develop climate action priorities. And it's really in that community and collaboration piece. Another part of the state plan where we see that we fit in is around agriculture and food systems. And one of the big parts of the tourism industry is food. And so we have been trying to uplift our partners that are producers or provide local food at restaurants, agritourism opportunities. How can we better connect our visitor economy to local food and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also looking at that long-term resiliency piece that we are better long-term when we continue to focus on our local food systems.
That's so excellent. And I have a couple kind of follow-ups within that great kind of summary of action altogether. I'm really glad you actually brought mitigation back into the conversation. Obviously, it being a very critical piece of this three-legged stool under climate action. And one thing we really recognized, I think largely in the work in Colorado and other destinations where nature-based tourism is really active and critical is that so often adaptation solutions also become mitigation solutions at the same time. So adapting to wanting to create new slow travel experiences, also being that we're using less emission heavy transportation options to get around, leaning into train travel versus individual car travel. Do you have any other examples that have come out of Colorado destinations where you've seen that it focuses on adaptation or resilience, but has a really great carbon emission reduction kind of byproduct as well?
Yeah, and this like kind of fits into your question, but I do think it's a fantastic example and really relevant, especially for anybody who's in the Western states. We had some state legislation passed back in 2023 for the tourism office to support communities and parks in achieving International Dark Sky Place certification. And so, sort of the like undertone of that is that, communities and parks have to reduce light pollution and emissions, but it's just been such a fantastic opportunity for visitor experience development, and has really been surprising as to the media attention that we've had over the past year that visitors love this opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity as well for private investments into opportunities, whether that's accommodations or experiences for experiencing the night sky. And so it's kind of this little sneaker where it's helping reduce light pollution and emissions, but also is really a unique opportunity for visitors to come and experience the state. And right now we have 19 international dark sky place certifications across the state. I believe Utah is number one, but it's been really fun to collaborate with other states and see what other DMOs are doing to support these amazing initiatives.
Yeah, that's been so exciting to see as a global movement, and just unlocking a lot of new potential for experience that people don't tend to get to have, or in traditions just aren't looking up at the night sky as often. And of course, if travelers are coming from these urban destinations, they don't really get to have access to that. So I love that that creates a lot of new opportunity. A similar one, you brought up the importance of food supply and that supply chain. I'd love to, Colorado has such a great history within agriculture, um, and the like. I wonder if you could speak to how destinations from, urban destinations can be high users, recipients for a lot of food supply for hotels and restaurants. Just there's just that higher density. But this seems to me like a great opportunity to be able to have urban destinations have greater connectivity to more rural places nearby, and really creating that important pipeline. Have there been more conversations between DMOs or cities, but urban places and rural within Colorado, and really strengthening partnerships to kind of see the opportunities within the food supply solution?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll come back to this sort of sphere of influence concept where, when you think about climate change and climate action, it can be a really overwhelming topic. And thinking about how tourism fits into a big topic like food systems can be really daunting. And so we've really leaned into our PR and marketing team, and they uplift our businesses, whether they're urban or rural, that have local food products and are doing really unique things with Colorado produce and ingredients. And that's been a really fantastic starting place that then starts to feed into larger discussions around the visitor experience and connecting other producers to restaurants. But I mean, we'll see that, all across Denver, and you start to see that filter into our airport. Portland does an amazing job of this. They only have local restaurants. And when you start to focus on those local restaurants, that's when you start to see that like local food systems being integrated into menus.
Absolutely. And I love that this one also meets a travel trend that's continued to grow in popularity. So around wellness, and feeling refreshed after a vacation or a trip rather than drawn down from eating poorly and otherwise. It's great that this is also a way to really highlight what destinations have to offer and what's particularly unique and special there. So I love it when there's a solution that's good for communities around resilience, and mitigation, but also really enhances the visitor experience. So that one's fantastic to learn about. Um, I'm wondering if we can kind of switch gears to looking at one aspect of this, which we really recognize that tourism organizations oftentimes are really at max capacity with staff time and funding. I wonder if you've seen any interesting solutions come through the Champions program or otherwise, where teams are really moving action forward, but that they're kind of low cost actions. And so they're able to show progress and really build step by step, but they're taking things at a really manageable pace. So I don't know if that's around, zero waste events or creating strengthening partnerships with cities, but do you have any kind of low cost actions you've seen come through for Colorado destinations?
Yeah, I'll share a few examples. And, throughout Colorado, a local destination and marketing and management organization looks very different. So our partners have been approaching this work in pretty different angles, just based on capacity, the structure of the DMO, the geographic location. I'll start with some of the work that we're doing that I think is pretty easy, and then I'll share a few examples from partners. One thing that we've been doing for a little while is that any of the marketing we do around reducing greenhouse gas emissions is really focused on the easier, fun default experience. So we had a whole campaign around taking public transportation up to the ski resorts in the winter, and there's zero mention of what is your climate, your footprint, or anything around greenhouse gas emissions. It really is that, hey, the bus is actually relaxing. You get free Wi-Fi. You do not have to deal with driving on the crazy freeway up to the ski resort. You just get to relax. And so I think just really focusing on that sort of climate lens of marketing without actually saying the thing, because what research tells us is that that emotional appeal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as an individual typically isn't the thing that leads to behavior change. It's really that, what's in it for me, what's sort of that default experience that you can lift up. And you can apply that to, uplifting low impact businesses, or those that are doing a really fantastic job in sustainability, the alternative transportation piece, local food systems, all of that. The other one is shifting your target market. So who's that target traveler? You can not only look at sort of the benefit of the traveler, but the cost of the traveler. And so there's some really great models out there to look at how can you target those travelers that aren't traveling all the way across the world to get there? Is there that sort of sweet spot where they're traveling less, but they will spend more time in your destination? And those that aren't typically traveling during that peak time of the year, so they're kind of reducing and dispersion. And so that's some fantastic, just kind of easy first steps in marketing. With the communities that we're working with, one community is really leaning into a partnership with the state. We have a a department within the state of Colorado that certifies businesses as sustainable. So instead of the tourism office coming up with its own sustainable tourism certification, we partnered with another state agency. And then we're seeing Aspen, Colorado, they've actually partnered with that state agency to create a regional certification opportunity for businesses. And the role of the DMO is to connect those local businesses to the city, which then does the certification piece in partnership with the state. So that's sort of that collaboration convener example. Another community that we're working with is really focused in on creating an ordinance around zero waste events. And with that example, the DMO sits within the town, and this is the town of Mount Crested Butte. So they have a little bit of a broader sphere of influence to be able to impact policy. And then the third example is the city of Durango. They actually started a food waste reduction program in partnership with their restaurants, and just piloted that program this year, knowing that food is one of the larger contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in the tourism industry. And so they're focused on the food piece. And then they're also looking at some longer term planning around water, because they're located in the southwest part of the state. So how can they partner with accommodations? Hotels are kind of one of the bigger users of water to reduce that impact.
That's so excellent. And there's one example, you've given such great examples across all of the four levers we think that DMOs can really participate in to lead in this space. I wanted to ask specifically, looking more at visitor information. One program you guys have, the Do Colorado Right campaign, I find really to be quite effective. And I think it really follows that line you were explaining about how really needing to keep communications in tourism very positive and leaning into folks' desires and interests and not necessarily finger wagging or coercing them to do the right action, just making the right action the most appealing one. I wonder, could you share a little bit more about the Do Colorado Right campaign and how that type of visitor education information can also have a really great byproduct of being good for climate too?
Yeah, so we started a campaign called Do Colorado Right during the pandemic. And the original goal of the campaign was to educate travelers on best practices with the pandemic. And it has massively evolved over the years. We originally evolved it into an education campaign for users on public lands because we had seen such an increase of visitation into the mountains that was really impacting public lands during the pandemic. Um, and it's been a really interesting test piece because, like Beth mentioned, folks don't typically respond well to you telling them not what to do and pointing a finger. Really, it's trying to gently and positively push them in the right direction. And so we've really leaned into that language and created over 20 destination specific Do Colorado Right campaigns across the state as well. But it's been interesting also to evolve this into promoting local foods, public transportation, and I think there's a lot of other opportunity around dark skies and our scenic byways, renting electric vehicles, etc., to really use it as an umbrella to provide that information and encourage visitors to visit Colorado in a more low impact manner.
Yeah, love it. And I'd love for anyone on here, if you want to go check it out, there's great information on the CTO's website and the various destinations that have participated, really inspiring content if you're curious of going down the same path. So before handing things over to Kyla, who will field some of our participant questions, I just had one last question for you, Hillary. Really around what kind of advice would you give to other destinations that would consider joining a program like the Risk Scan or the Climate Champions type of program, from DMO to DMO or, tourism professional to tourism professional? What kind of advice would you give if they're considering it?
Yeah, I would say it's okay to not know the outcomes and to um, put yourself in a risky spot, to be vulnerable and to be in that learning space. With a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past year, launching strategies within a destination stewardship strategic plan, I have had to sort of embrace this space of not being the expert, and that being okay. And I think just kind of relinquishing that control and being in that learning mindset, and then figuring out where you kind of fit into the bigger piece of that puzzle. But I will say it's okay to learn a lot of things that you might not work for the DMO that you work for. But my guess is that you'll find some fantastic nuggets to start and then continue to build on with time.
Awesome. I love that. And I really appreciate you iterating how it's a really iterative process. There is no end perfect goal to addressing our new climate reality. So that's really helpful. Great. Well, Kyla, let me hand it over to you. I think you've been kind of fielding some of the questions we've had from folks. But thanks so much, Hillary.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hillary, for sharing those insights and for giving us a real look at what climate adaptation looks like on the ground in Colorado. So now we're going to open the floor for questions and discussion. If you have something you'd like to ask or comment on, please drop in the Q&A or chat. We'd love to hear your perspective on how these ideas could also apply to your own destination. One of our first questions is, I'm interested in the concept of risk in this discussion, as is being discussed solely as risk climate changes poses to the tourism industry. Do you have insights on the risk tourism poses to the environment? Do you have any relevant case studies that are examples of reducing environmental impact while simultaneously supporting sustainable tourism? So the way I would answer that is, in today's conversation, we've been talking about climate risk to tourism, but there's clearly a reciprocal dimension. The risk tourism poses to the environment if it isn't managed carefully. And so tourism can exacerbate climate pressures through emissions, infrastructure expansion, and ecosystem degradation, particularly in fragile environments like coastal areas, alpine regions, and small islands. And so true climate adaptation has to be two-directional. It's about destinations not only protecting tourism for climate impacts, but also making tourism part of the solution. Some compelling case studies that I'm familiar with is Palau's Responsible Tourism Pledge, which requires every visitor to sign a personal commitment to protect the environment. So this directly links stewardship to visitor behavior. Also, Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada is a good example of investment in low impact mobility and waste systems that protect ecosystems while enhancing the visitor experience. And as we talked about earlier, Barcelona is really a leader in the space. So their DMO has embedded environmental impact indicators into the visitor management system. So visitor volume, carbon intensity, and local quality of life are all monitored together by their DMO. Our next question, and somewhat related to what we were just talking about, is how can destinations measure their progress on adaptation? What indicators or KPIs should they use? I think this is almost one of the probably most asked questions when we talk about this kind of work. So measuring adaptation isn't necessarily about a single number. It's about tracking how well destinations are managing risk, protecting assets, and maintaining competitiveness over time. Generally, the KPIs that we often use can go into three categories. So the first might be around exposure and vulnerability metrics. So the number of tourism assets within high-risk flood, fire, or heat zones, and how that changes as mitigation projects are completed. The second is around operational resilience indicators. So things like visitor satisfaction during extreme weather events, business continuity rates, or infrastructure uptime. And the final is government and investment indicators. So cross-departmental coordination on climate planning, access to adaptation funding, and stakeholder participation rates. So the key is to choose metrics that connect climate readiness with tourism performance. So you can show how adaptation safeguards both community well-being, but also economic impact. We have another question here. Many destinations feel under-resourced. What are low-cost first steps a DMO can take towards adaptation? So this is definitely a common question. Often DMOs don't traditionally have budget in the climate action space. And so they often have to carve it out of other areas. So some of the most effective early steps organizations can take are often partnership based. So things like developing visitor communication protocols, so making sure your website and partners can share consistent, timely safety information during climate events, building seasonality or dispersal campaigns. So a lot of the destinations do this already, but maybe don't necessarily link it to climate action. So even small shifts in when and where people travel can reduce pressure on vulnerable areas and help communities adapt. And perhaps most importantly, map what's already being done. And I think Hillary really emphasized this point by city or regional climate teams, so you can align rather than duplicate their efforts. So adaptation really starts with coordination and communication. So both of which cost far less than capital projects, but create the foundation for long-term resilience. We have another question here. How can DMOs partner with city planners and local governments to align resilience efforts? So I think this really builds on the questions we just talked about. Partnership is critical, as is collaboration. So most climate adaptation work happens in municipal domain, transit, infrastructure, housing. But tourism, of course, depends on those same systems. So the most effective DMO position themselves as connectors and communicators. So things they can do is participate in or help convene joint climate or resilience task forces, provide visitor flow data and insights to help city planners understand how tourism interacts with infrastructure and stress. Oftentimes, those city planners look at resident flows, but often visitor flows are a blind spot for them. And then align tourism strategies with existing resilience or hazard mitigation plans, so ensuring shared goals and joint funding opportunities. And one of our last questions is, when DMOs are part of these planning tables, oh, sorry, someone asked, what are examples of DMOs that are aligning climate action with investment attraction? So one organization that we work closely with at Resonance is Destination Canada. And on a lot of the projects that they've been working on lately, their tourism corridor programs, which create or aim to grow tourism in rural and remote areas of Canada primarily. A lot of the investment plans that they're creating rely on climate smart infrastructure and experiences as part of their investment criteria. So by incorporating adaptation into their investment frameworks, Destination Canada is aiming to de-risk projects for investors by demonstrating preparedness for climate impacts, align with federal and international funding streams such as green infrastructure or resilience funds, and differentiate their tourism offerings. So positioning themselves as climate ready allows some destinations to attract higher value and values aligned travelers and investors to their region. So these climate adaptation strategies belong in investment attraction, and they're part of the business case for the next generation of tourism development. So I think that's all the questions that we had today. And I think we'll start to close off our webinar. What I'll say is thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and engagement today. If there's one thing we hope you take away, is that adaptation is not tomorrow's task, it's today's opportunity. And by integrating climate into how we plan, design, and manage destinations, we can protect what makes them special while strengthening the communities that call them home. So we encourage you to explore the Destination Climate Risk Scan. I know there's been several links put in the chat, and think about what becoming climate ready could mean for your destination. On behalf of Resonance, thank you for joining us and for being part of a growing movement to make tourism a force for resilience and regeneration. And of course, thank you, Hillary, for coming today. We really enjoyed your talk. Thank you so much, everyone.